Deputy Minister Stewart responds to you and raises a number of questions, essentially, in those bullet points at the bottom. And if we could just go through those briefly, and if you can tell me whether those were ever sort of addressed in a conversation. Would the signatory of the letter or the person who goes to the meeting be putting themselves at risk? Is that a big concern?
That wasn't a big concern for me.
Okay, why not?
Well, I think, Inspector Moore or Superintendent Morris spoke to it as far as the violence and stuff in the group. And so to me, there wasn't a pile of risk there. I personally wasn't concerned, but I know that there would be obviously some sort of assessment from someone before that would happen, right? As far as who's identified from the protest group that would be in there. And I'm sure there's people that the government probably wouldn't want to meet with as well, right?
Right, which that takes us down to the sort of third point about POI sheets, and there was a concern about who was going to be involved in that negotiation. Did it ever get to that point where you shared a list of names with the government and they raised any issue about that?
No, because I think the next day he called me in the morning. Is this Saturday?
The 12th is the Saturday. That's
Saturday, right. Yeah, so he called me in the next morning and said that he was not able to make this happen, ultimately.
Okay, and why? Where did because I understand you were on board on behalf of the OPP, the OPS was on board. It seems like the RCMP was kind of provisionally on board. So what was the issue?
I definitely was not involved in the conversations that stopped that from happening. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No. So, but as far as you know, you got a call from Deputy Minister Stewart.
Yes.
The next morning.
Yeah, and he just said that he was not successful ultimately to getting this going forward.
Police are unable to solve the underlying issues. There's very limited capacity for police to solve this situation without some movement by government to allow demonstrators to have a win of sorts. Now, I expect that former Chief Slowly will say that that's what he meant when he said there may not be a policing solution to this on February 2nd. So, is this sentiment, which is being expressed by your team member about 8 days later, did you agree with it? And did you sort of agree with Chief Slowly or former Chief Slowly that there wasn't a policing solution to some of the grievances?
So there's been one time in my experience with protests where I've said the underlying issues that they are grieving are police related, and that was during the defund police reform protests in 2020. And other than that, typically the protests have grievances to do with government. The grievances have different, anyway, it's out of the realm of police to solve those issues as to why people are protesting, demonstrating and occupying places. So yes, I agree with that.
Okay. But that doesn't mean, just to get back to it, that doesn't mean there's no role for police to play. It's just that the police aren't going to deliver on the protesters' demands.
Yeah, I can't stop vaccination. Like all the grievances and supports that were there is beyond my control as far as an inspector in the OPP, right?
Proposal that was worked on between yourself, the Deputy Minister of Public Safety, and Commissioner Brenda Lucki of the RCMP. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And this engagement proposal was essentially approved by the Deputy Minister of Public Safety, but of course, it wasn't his decision whether it was going to be carried out, but he approved it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't think that he approved it. I think he was taking it as for consideration to the ministers. That's how, he was looking for advice to forward.
Okay.
Right?
But he never indicated to you that it was something that he thought was a bad idea?
He never said that it was a bad idea.
You should cease engaging and that you should direct that there be enforcement actions taken.
No, he never directed anything. He did not direct anything.
Right. And Commissioner Lucki of the RCMP, she reviewed this proposal as well?
Yeah, she had reached out to me.
Right. And she thought it was a good proposal?
She had some issues with it.
Right, and those issues, though, weren't with respect to the engagement issue. It had nothing to do with that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it was some verbiage. I think she talked about some people had some concerns, right?
Right. And so in this proposal, of course, it says that upon an agreement to the proposal, you'd provide a police liaison in writing a commitment to government engagement at a later date, and that could be shared in a meeting with the protest leaders, right?
I believe so.
Right. So the plan was, and the recommendation was, is that essentially the government of Canada, the political branch of the government of Canada, would agree to a meeting with the protesters, but there would be certain conditions to that, and they would have to denounce anything unlawful and get out of downtown Ottawa. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. And in your interactions with the Deputy Minister and Commissioner Lucky after February 12th, 2022, did they tell you anything about what happened with this proposal?
I think the proposal was kind of like dead in the water after the 13th.
Now, I understand this is an email from the Deputy Minister of Public Safety, Rob Stewart, to you, right?
Yes.
Okay, and in the third sentence on the top paragraph, it says, "We have a big meeting this afternoon where this will be discussed, so I really need your input," right?
Yes.
All right. Did you know that that meeting was at 3:30 p.m. and that it was with Cabinet and it was the incident response group of the political executive meeting and that your proposal was provided to them?
No.
Okay. It was. I can tell you that. And then they invoked the Emergencies Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You were involved in if I can call it, the end piece when they ended the protest and police involvement, and you were involved with the PLTs at that time?
Yes, sir.
Was there any option offered at that time for continued lawful demonstration? In other words, if people, and assuming there were demonstrators who wanted to continue a lawful demonstration because their aims had not been yet achieved, was there an option made available to them somewhere, some way to do that? As I understand, there was a sort of an exclusion zone created,
Yes.
and people couldn't go in except certain individuals.
Yes.
And what was the final direction to people? Was it you have to leave the zone? I'm talking about the final days when
Yes.
there was action. Was it at that point there would be action, you had to leave the zone, the protest was over, or was there an offer of something?
Yeah, it was basically you had to leave the zone. So there were stronghold areas, right? Like areas where they were in defensible position, where there was a variety of different trucks, cars, whatever, parked, right? So the objective, I believe, for that day, and the public order guys will probably be able to tell you more, was to ensure that that was all cleared and take back that space and return the city to a state of normalcy. There was no, like, I don't know exactly where people were directed to go, but they just couldn't be in those areas that were being cleared, right? And so my concern for that day, it was -22, we were in a windstorm. And, you know, from a humanitarian perspective, I was hoping that we had a warm bus for people to go on to so that that way no one's freezing to death if they slip around the corner, right? And so outside of that, I don't exactly know what considerations were put into place other than providing an egress route for people to leave.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you for your testimony and for coming to the commission, and thank you for your work.